And the windows were really dark. So like no one could see that someone was inside. And these like two girls got out from their car to go to the store. And then they started to circle around the car while I'm sitting in there. And like when he came out, they started a conversation with him.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, this is how it happens, right?
Yeah.
This is how he's realized that, his worth as a man is
Absolutely.
the car, right?
Mm-hmm,
and it's interesting because he's like, obviously to some degree, someone knows that it's an extrinsic value, right? So it's not me, it's the car you want. So there's an underlying unconscious or even maybe a conscious thing of like, I'm kind of being used, right? Yeah. So then he doesn't have a problem engaging with those girls because it's like, okay, well, fair enough. You're using me for my money or my car. I'm going to use you for a good time.
Welcome back. We are on today with my guest Kathrine Bejanyan on the Tool for Dish It podcast. I'm Angie Sorensen, the founder of angies.com. That's angie-s.com. Link in the show notes. Where I'm a health coach helping busy women fed up of trendy wellness bullshit look and feel younger and just better effortlessly without Botox. Okay, we talk about what you eat, put on your skin, and do to feel good. And also, just so you know, I'm not going to ask you to run through a field of wheat, eating a bowl of dirt, and like slapping egg whites on your face. Like, seriously, who started that last one? Gross and crazy. So, big thank you for listening. It means a lot that you guys are like, tuning in every week to listen, all this stuff. And honestly, I'm having so much fun. And, the more of you that listens, the more it actually supports this show and helps me continue with this. And so if you haven't yet, please share this podcast with your friends, rate, review, subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts, follow it on Spotify, or for all the other platforms, whichever way you are, wherever you are listening from, whichever way you can show love on those is how you can support this show. That's basically it. And the more you do that, the more it helps new listeners discover this show. And guess what? It helps me grow and it helps me like just being able to put out free content for you every week. So it takes just 2 seconds for you to do, and it's absolutely free for you to do. Isn't that great? Like, how does that sound good or what? Like, little time, no money. I'll give you a second. You can just go and do it now if you want to. I'm not pushing you or anything, but if you want to, like, that'd be super great. That pushy? Okay. I'll hold back for now, but I'll come back to this. Next week, I'll just say it again. Next week, every week. Yes, that's right. So today we talk about money in dating, relationships, and divorces. So we were actually an hour in before I realized I did not press the record button. We were an hour into the interview before I realized I did not press the record button, which is ironic since that's my biggest fear. Each time I interview someone, I'm like, have I pressed record? Have I pressed record? Have I pressed record? Have I pressed record? And the one time I don't do it, the one time I don't obsessively check, I have not pressed record. Okay? So I will not be made fun of double checking and triple checking stuff because the one time I don't do it, this is what happened. So listen, Kathrine was a great sport as we did not have much time to redo it. But honestly, I hope you enjoyed it. I think it's a great episode. I definitely learned something new today around money and love with Kathrine. So without further ado, let's begin. Hi, Kathrine. Welcome back.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited to have you back on. We actually had some technical difficulties. We were wait about an hour and I hadn't pressed record. So I just wanted to say that. And so, that's why I'm giggling and whatnot. But Kathrine's being a good sport. So thank you. We actually know each other in real life. We've been friends for a while and, we can talk for days on end. So I always really appreciate your expertise. For those who don't know, you're going to introduce yourself in a minute, but you are a dating and relationships therapist. And, your opinion is one that I value very much. And so I wanted to talk to you today about money and finances in dating and relationships, because at the moment, with the pandemic, a lot of people's lives has been turned upside down, some for the better, some for the worse. Some people are earning less than ever, or nothing, and others are making more than ever, right? Like if you're into the toilet rolls and the hand sanitizers, you're like really, you're laughing all the way to the bank, but other people have lost their jobs. So I figured that many at the moment probably come across some new money issues if they didn't have previously. And so I wanted to know how we can tackle it in our dating lives or our current relationships. And so before we dive into this, please introduce yourself, where you live and what you do.
Hi, everyone. I am located in central London in the UK. What I do, I help individuals or couples have better love and relationships lives. So if individuals come to me, it's not just about short-term dating, the short-term tricks and rules and stuff that you can apply to get someone, but really like, what do you do with them after you have them, right? And similarly with couples, if they come to me and they're having issues in their relationship, how do we clear out those issues to either have them have a long, healthy relationship, or they may be breaking up, but not how to walk away without an accumulated baggage of resentment and anger at your partner that you have to live with for the rest of your life. So that's what I do. Help people in their love lives.
Okay, so either like come closer together or like breaking up in a way that's not damaging as it could be. Okay. So I didn't know about the breaking up bit, but yeah, it does make sense because a lot of people go to therapy to make the big decisions. So yeah, it does make sense. So I wanted to tackle with you first and foremost, before we dive into like the more deeper stuff, let's say you are back out there and you're dating and you may have lost your job, but the other person is, doing quite well in this economy and they're clearly earning more than you. How do you tackle the conversation about the bills on the dates when you go to restaurants, holidays, buying gifts, that kind of stuff? Because, after a few days in, the dynamic may vary a little bit and you want to chat with them. And the premise of this question is coming from a place where the person who's earning less does not feel like entitled to the other person sponsoring their lives, right? So it's not after sugar daddy or sugar mommy. It's about they just want to make sure the person does not feel used, and also they're embarrassed. So how do you have this conversation? Because you may feel embarrassed and you may feel like a loser if you're the one who's earning less and you just don't know. And again, not everyone feels that way, but that's where I would be. So how would you tackle that conversation with that person you're dating or entering a relationship with?
Well, firstly, I think that just based on what you said, which was awesome, that like if they're not trying to take advantage, right? The person earning less is not actually trying to take advantage of the other individual earning more. So if that is the case, and you feel like you don't want to come across like you're taking advantage and you don't say anything, you don't bring up the conversation, the other person that is spending more might inadvertently think that that's what you're doing. So as awkward as this conversation is, it needs to happen because it actually puts you in a better light to say, hey, I'm struggling. Right now I lost my job, or I'm working on a business idea, or whatever it is, or we just might have different like amounts in our bank account. And as a result of that, I'm having a hard time keeping up with you, but I really need you to know that this isn't because I'm trying to take advantage of the situation. It's because I actually can't keep up, right? Like people can understand that. That's understandable. But let's say you don't say anything. All that it's coming across the other person is every time you guys go out, they're having to pay for it. So first and foremost, you don't have to feel that awkward about it, because while the conversation is awkward, it's actually putting you in a much, much better light, because not having the conversation puts you in a worse position in their eyes.
Yeah.
And secondly, then you can offer some options like, hey, maybe we can, have more cooking dates at home, or we can go to museums that, I've looked at these types of events that like don't cost that much money, but are equally fun. And so you offer some options. And thirdly, you talk about what you capable of spending, right? So that every time you are out spending, he or she, the other person, isn't feeling like, oh my God, you don't have money, and now, they're having to worry about everywhere you guys go that like, oh, he might be putting you in an uncomfortable position because you don't have that much. So you go, I'm fine with spending like maybe about 100 pounds on dinner, but like once a month. Right. Mm-hmm. Or I'm fine to do a nice trip within this budget range every couple of months. And so that when you are spending, it's not putting you in an anxious state, and it's not now putting him in an anxious state, feeling like, oh, he's making you spend money that you don't have.
Right. Yeah. And also it also enables the other person who's actually earning to make an informed decision, right? Because they may not be down for that. They may also realize they may not feel enough for you to be putting up with that transitional phase, right? Yes. So either way, it's a win-win, because you don't want to be hanging out with someone who isn't really seeing any future anyway. So yes. You may as well be saving that 100 pounds on the dinner monthly, yes. on improving yourself and getting to a better situation. So either way, it's painful, but it needs to be had. And I think the other thing is, so let's say that person who earns more, right? I think, let's say, as the higher earner, if I wanted to, this is a hypothetical, but say if I was a higher earner in a situation like this, then if that person says that to me, I may still want to go on a luxury holiday or a luxury restaurant or wherever it is, mm-hmm. but then that would be my choice, and then I would have to be covering that, because mm-hmm. I think there's also a feeling of you don't want to, because the other person, you may be into the other person, but let's say you also have things that you want to do and experiences, and you don't want to stop yourself from doing that. Like, I guess, like muzzle your options. Yeah. Because of the person, because then you'll also feel resentment towards them, right? So yes, there is that. And I think then in that case, it'll be fair for the person who's the higher earner to cover that, to be aware that they're going to have to cover more for that trip or for that experience. For sure. Yeah. If the person that's earning more and feels like they want to do certain things and they have the capacity, and they have the capacity to pay for the other person as well, that's fine. What they have to do with the position they have to come from is, the person I'm dating that doesn't have that much money and they're not going to be contributing equally, do they have other qualities that that make up for that, right? Like, they might not earn a lot of money, but they have other qualities where, like, I spend time with them, I feel happier, it's such a great time. And to me, like, I'm getting that. And so I'm happy to spend more money, right? So again, money is just a variable. It's just a resource. It's one thing that we bring to the relationship. So if we bring that resource, but the other person doesn't have that resource, but they have other resources that contribute to the well-being of a relationship, then great. In the long run, there's equity. It equalizes in terms of the value we're giving and we're getting from a relationship, right? But if the person doing the spending, I'm spending more money, and also I don't feel like you have other resources or values that you are giving in return for the money I'm spending. So now I just feel like I'm giving more than I'm getting in that relationship, and I'm going to gain great resentment over time. And the values could be like you mentioned earlier, like in the non-recorded part of this thing, like it was like emotional intelligence, for example, or they keeping the house, let's say if they live together, they're keeping the house nice and clean or whatever. They supporting you in some sort of capacity. Exactly. In any way. And I think we get in trouble when we are looking at things from like a traditional perspective, right? Like, oh, well, if he's contributing more money, but I'm keeping the house. Now we're in a traditional relationship. No, that's not true. Like, while it looks like that maybe on the outside because of the roles, people previously were stuck in their roles. There was no flexibility in those roles, right? Women had to like be in a position of having to handle kids and the household more because they just didn't have the amount of career options that they do now, or the support in society to be able to go out and be independent and earn. Whereas now it's a choice, right? So the choice to say, I don't earn as much, but I also don't have the demanding job like my partner does. So I'm happy to like take more responsibility for cooking and cleaning and laundry and stuff just because I have more time and energy to do that. But on the flip side, he earns a lot more money
for his job, and therefore he can contribute that resource. That, to me, that's not a traditional relationship. It looks like that from the outside, but in actuality, internally, you guys are just being smart in terms of what resources each one can provide best.
Yeah. And I think I'm just thinking of the conversation we had earlier. I'm beating myself up about not recording it, but it was because we had earlier about, because I had a bit of an epiphany when we talked about, I know we're jumping a bit ahead here, but I had this epiphany about divorces and how, because I come from because you're talking about like the value, there's that one person goes out and earn the money, and the other person maybe earning less, but they're contributing in another way and supporting the other person to be able to go out there and having a very demanding career or job. And so we went into that whole divorce things because I realized when I was talking to you that I actually been judging people probably from a wrong place. I didn't realize it because I'm independent. I've never had a man look after me in that way. I mean, I've been spoiled there and there a little bit, but I've never had, and I grew up, my mom is a single mom. So it's very much been wired into me that, I have to work to pay my living, basically, to have a living that I have. So when I'd seen people getting divorced, and I'd seen it from both sides, one, the high earner being stripped off like half of their earning, if not more, and often having to actually go out and take a loan because often the woman just wanted more and more, they just really just stripped them off everything. And then I've seen it from the other side where the woman is like, no, I should be getting half, I should, like as if it's, when I know that within their marriage, and I know we've jumped from dating to marriage, but in their marriage, the high earner in those situations was the woman. I'm sorry, it sounds very sexist, but in those scenarios was the man. Sorry, I know they're supported financially too. They've been carrying their wives, over 50% by far through the whole marriage. And I found that at the time, I felt that it was a little bit unfair that even though they had been they'd been supported by their partner financially and stuff, that they did not understood, they weren't appreciative of it, and they still demanded like half of their earnings, half of everything, even stuff they came in with money and wanted half of that too. And I thought, I was like, you do not appreciate what it's like, how far you've come in life because you had a partner who could support you in a city that's not easy like London. And so that used to rub me the wrong way. But then when we were talking earlier, you explained this thing about how obviously there are other ways that she would have contributed to enable him to go out and earn. And so I think I've been judging, some women quite harshly, and I know it doesn't, it makes me sound really bad now. But so I was definitely judging them wrong. I think where I still draw the line is that if someone comes in with money they already have before I meet them, I do not have I don't want any of that money. That has nothing to do with me. But if we build something together, which I also used to believe before, but I didn't realize that you could build something together also by supporting each other emotionally, right? So if you build something together and you both agree, that one person stays home because the other person needs to be out there and they need that, whatever, you make a decision as a team. If you do divorce, then yes, you need to be able to compensate the other person, because let's say that the woman hasn't worked in 10 years. What does she do now? She's been helping you, building your big business. She's part of that, making it happen, the emotional support, keeping the house, raising the kids or whatnot. You know what I'm saying? So I think there's definitely discernment, but I did not realize how much of this non-measurable quality a wife brought into the equation, because I've always done everything myself. And I sort of almost, you know what I'm saying? It's like, it felt a bit like that entitlement thing. Some of them could come across entitled.
Definitely. And I think to the outside, it might come across that way. And just because sometimes the resources, as we're talking about, that we contribute are not measurable, they're not visible. right? I can't measure the amount of times I've sat on the couch with you while you felt down and depressed about how things are going, and I gave you the emotional support. Like, I don't have a number for that, right? I can't measure how many times you've come home angry or grumpy and I haven't said anything and I've just given you space so you can like go through that process, or the amount of Saturdays and Friday nights that I've had to come to business dinners with you or networking events and like play that supportive partner role, or even not go out and stay at home because you're still working and stuff. So those things that make a huge difference in the other person who's trying to reach success, like it makes a huge impact on their mental health so that they can reach that success. But like when you're divorced, you can't, there's nothing to show for all of those invisible variables that contributed to that support, right? All there is the person who's earned the money that can say, look, this is what I've done. These are the promotions I got. This is the business I've built. This is the money that I've earned that I've given to my partner. And the other persons can't be like, well, I've cooked 1,000 dinners for you. I've had, 100 something nights of emotional support. Like, so it puts that person where they've contributed resources that are invisible and unmeasurable at a massive disadvantage.
Yeah, and I think there's also a sacrifice, right? The partner who stays home. I mean,
massively.
And again, we're talking in really broad strokes here, because obviously there are people who just don't want to work and they just want to be spoiled and they barely be there to support you. I think maybe there is a difference. I think maybe that's when, because what I've noticed now, this was why we brought it up earlier in the non-recorded part, is that I've noticed men say, even after they've been stripped of their money, they say it's not about the money. And I never really understood really what they meant. I'm not sure. It was like, they were like, I was sort of assumed they were saying that because, well, they used to make money, they've lost money, they'll make it again, like this very like, businessy kind of way of looking at things, which is great. But I think maybe is to do like, if the person who's been stripped of their money in a divorce, they may feel taken advantage of if they don't realize what the partner has done for them in that time, or maybe also the partner didn't do anything. I'm sure there's scenarios like this where the wife just wants like a Gucci bag every month and being taken on trips and doesn't really do anything other than looking good. And this is very simplifying it a lot, but there may be scenarios like this where the men really feel like, I think for me, if I was stripped, because I know what it's like, I've had people assuming things about me and wanting me to cover them for things when I'm like, I didn't even know where that came from because I didn't have the money, but it feels awful. Yeah. And I've witnessed it with girlfriends on the night out, like on birthday parties years ago, where I have friends, friends who have no money, others who have money, it's a big mix. And I've witnessed it and I was shocked. This was my birthday. And I could see there was 3 girls just sat there. You could see they were waiting for the guy. They never once offered a drink to anyone. It was my birthday. They didn't even offer me, but because they could see a couple of my guy friends, making quite a bit of money. And you could tell they were just like expecting it. And I witnessed it and I wanted to slap them. I was so mad because I felt it was embarrassing. And also it's embarrassing and you're using the guy. And so I am sure that in scenarios like this, some of these women, probably one of them actually was going through a divorce. So I'm sure that in their marriage, it may have been that way too. And they hadn't actually provided anything interesting in the night. It's not like as if they were the entertainment.
Right. I mean, that's it. Like, I think that it's, so there's sort of 2 sides to that story. There's definitely someone who's intentionally like trying to take advantage and knows they're not contributing enough in other ways to their relationship. But I think there is like with women, I also see, I deal with a lot of women that are professionals that are like, doing their own thing and earning their own money, but it's almost like an overemphasis on a sense of independence and not like making a guy feel like, like that she has to rely on him, like an overemphasis, like making sure that she, equally pays. And it's like, and it's never allowing herself to be like treated, right? Because she's so afraid of coming across as like that old school type of woman that's just after a guy for his money. And it's almost like it's a disadvantage sometimes. Like I've seen situations where the woman is working against their own best interest in the long run by not taking the support and help. So I'll like give you an example, like, you know, in a relationship, you know, where the woman wanted to start a business of her own, but that meant she had to quit her job and go for no paycheck for a very long time, until she was able to build that business. And again, these two individuals were in a relationship. They were going to get married. So they were building a life together. And he was like, yeah, I'm happy to do that. Like, I'm happy to like support you as long as you need until you like build your business. But she, for that period of time, a year or two, where she wasn't going to earn anything and she was going to depend on him, she like couldn't handle it. Like it took
that gives me anxiety just hearing it. I don't know how.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I say anxiety. I don't feel the anxiety because I realize it's not happening to me. But that to me is very uncomfortable, because what happens if you have a big fight? Like you don't have the same leverage. He's got all the leverage on you.
Right. But then
he can just leave, and then you haven't worked in 5 months. How do you explain it in an interview? Well, my boyfriend was looking after me. No one likes to hear that at HR.
Right.
Human resources do not give a shit. They're like, oh, well, okay, she's spoiled. Like,
well, you don't have to say that.
No, I know, but what are you going to say?
You can say I was working off of my earnings because I was building a business, right? Like, you don't have to say anything. You have to say I was building a business. So I think that's it. That was the anxiety that was coming up for her. And when we looked at her past, she comes from a history of women where like men have let them down, right? Aunts and uncles and mom and like stuff that like men haven't stepped in the relationship, and the women have been left at a disadvantage over and over again. So she had internalized that, and it was like, I'm never going to like depend on a man because they can. It's exactly what you said. They can leave you, and then you're screwed. Yeah. Now the flip side was she wasn't looking at her man and going, maybe he's not like that. Right. And she was cutting herself off from an opportunity to potentially reach a dream that she had, which is setting up her own business, because she couldn't detach from like that, anxiety from the past of other women in her family. Right. Yeah. So it's like, it was a disadvantage to her because she wasn't willing to set up her own business. And she was like, well, I'm just going to keep working. Right. Even though her guy was like, that's not a big deal. I'll pay for us. So that's where it's like, that's what I mean, that sometimes our reluctance to rely on our partner, even when it's right, no one's taking advantage of either person, but in our head, we just don't want to. And it's interesting to me because I'm like, in a relationship, you really should be pooling your resources together to create a greater whole, right? Yeah. To help each other reach each other's dreams. So there's, in a long-term relationship, there's going to be times where one of you struggles in one area versus the other, but and the other person is stronger. So like they can carry that load while you build yourself.
Yeah. Okay. So this is interesting because, so I'll chime in with this. Okay. Because I have, in theory, right, mm-hmm. This is how I feel. In theory, this is how I feel, is that if I'm in a relationship, like committed relationship with someone, we've been together for a while, if I'm going through a hard time financially, no, I can't even start with that one. If he's going with, so I have a relationship with men. So if he's going through a hard time financially, I am happy to cover for that time. Like if it's because he's in a change of career or whatever's going on, he does his job, I'm happy. I think that's what a team does. I believe that's what a team does. And I feel it's normal that, let's say if it happens to me, or let's say if he wants to go back and study for a little bit, whatever. Yeah. And I think it should go both ways. However, I'm not sure how. I haven't had that experience of knowing how that feels like and be comfortable, because actually now that I'm saying it, for me, I can literally feel actually a bit anxious just talking about it. I don't know, because I my mom's a single mom. I've always paid my own way. I haven't relied on a man to pay for things. I mean, I've been spoiled on dates and I've been taken out and stuff. I've never had a relationship with a guy, I don't know. It's been a while anyway. So it's like, I don't know. I feel like maybe it's because I feel like the person with the money has all the power, you know? But
Yes. Yeah.
theoretically, everything that you said, I understand. And I agree with the fact that we all have different values. It's like saying women, the only value she brings is sex, and the guy, the only thing he brings is money. That's not true. That is not the kind of people I want to kick it with either. Like if someone sees you in that such diminishing way, that's not the type of person I want to be with. There's emotional support, there's the laughters, there's that togetherness, there's, all the things that makes a relationship. And money is only one part of it.
Well, that what you just said was interesting when you said the person with the money has all the power.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's the underlying fear, right? That's what her fear is. That's what I'm hearing. Your fear is that if I give up that power position to earn my own money, now I'm under their control or their power. Right.
Especially because they were not married as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Yeah.
It's very vulnerable.
It is a vulnerable position, which means that the level of trust in the relationship has to be so deep that that person would never use their position of power against you, but actually for you.
That's what you'd hope, right? But it's like, I guess that's where you have to really get to know someone, and you have to, like you were talking earlier, and I'm so sorry I didn't record that bit, but like you mentioned about when from the beginning that how you tackle, let's say when you're dating, how you tackle restaurant holidays when you're not earning and they're earning, and you mentioned about how the primary issue is that you don't have the money. It's stressful to cover for all those nights out when you're not working. And it's also very unreasonable to do, right? It's a dangerous situation to put yourself in. But if you don't talk about it, it creates second and third level issues, right? And so I think like with anything, like in relationships, you have to talk about the first issue. And I think you wouldn't want to get to a place where a few years in or 2 years in or whatever, you're in that position where your partner, whether it's the man or the woman, your partner wants to cover you so that you can go in and start your own business or, really get into it, to feel like, well, he's going to have all the power. You would hope that you've worked it out so well that that person, you understand their values. And I think that's why it's so important to have those difficult conversations up top, and especially money, because money is important. You need a roof above your head. You need to eat. Money is what gives you a roof above your head. And I think the other part also I want to say is that, let's say if I was a high earner, I wouldn't, there's a discernment between someone who is entitled to, feels like that should be covering them, and who's just like sitting on the couch all day and expecting me to cover everything, to where someone who has a vocation that's never going to pay them a lot of money. There could be a social worker, there could be an artist, but they have amazing work ethic. Yeah. They're really passionate. That person, I'm happy to carry them financially, because obviously I'm with them because they have all these other values. And I think that's that feeling of being used. And I have, in the past, I have actually lost money on, that's what I used, took my money basically. Yeah. So I know that feeling from both, I've known it from the side of like that person just, took money for their rent, and I don't know, it's like it's money talks.
Money, and this is why like having these discussions around money is so important, because money is not just the monetary value. There's a lot of emotion attached to money, right? So power, and it's as you're saying, like you need money to like live. So it goes to our most core like safety issues, right? If I don't have money, I don't have like ability to buy food and like have a place to stay, right? So it's like a very, very, it goes to our like very basic needs, which means our security needs are going to be attached to money and how, we're spending it and whatever. So we need to be able to have conversations around money in a way that, goes beyond just the numbers to like, what is the intrinsic value of money? What are the emotional attachments? So with this girl, like saying this couple where she didn't want to do that. Like, it wasn't about not wanting to take his money, right? It was about a safety issue. It was about how she viewed men in general, right? Like men had let the women in her family down. So she had an internal suspicion of men just to begin with. She didn't want to give a man that kind of power over her. So the conversation went from money to like, we're talking about trust, and we're talking about power dynamics, you know, and we're talking about intentions and purpose in a relationship as well. I think there's a difference between, like, for me, the way I look at the relationships and the long-term potential of it is, how do I leverage this relationship to make me help me become better than I am, and vice versa, right? Like, I don't want just a companion to hang out with and do cool stuff with or have conversations with. I want my relationship to, like, for me to be able to look back in 10 years and say, yeah, because I had you by my side, or I was in this relationship, I've done more and I'm a better person as a result of it.
Oh, 100%. And I think that's when you also know that, I mean, that's how I feel like, that's how I know if I'm with someone that's good for me, because in, like, at the beginning, so much stuff comes up and you almost like, there's this, it's almost like the teething issues, right? The growing pains of a new relationship, because there's things that are gonna, there's like a mirror, and you know, and the thing with money is a huge trigger for a lot of people. It definitely is for me. And I think, you want to come out as like a better person, and you're growing and you make each other accountable. And it's not to sound like all Tony Robbins-y, because I don't like Tony Robbins, but I mean, but you know, effectively there is some growth. You know, you don't want to, a lot of people want to stagnate, and that's fine. Like, I like to grow. And I was just thinking about maybe like for the couple example, the example you gave of that couple, is that maybe also one of her fears, and I think that would be mine, is that, let's say he says, okay, for 2 years, I cover you, you focus on your business. You obviously have to agree on a time span, how long you want to do this for. But maybe from her side, she'd be like, what if this fails? Then what? Then,
and that's
he's wasted 2 years of his earnings on me.
No, he hasn't.
And then he can also see close up that you're a failure. I mean, I don't know, you know, all these.
I mean, that's it. Like, I think when you
it's
said,
all insecurities, but
when it's about growth, it's like, you know, and said leveraging our relationship to be better. It's not just like, oh, let's say her business worked out, and like, oh, she's better for it because she has a business that the relationship like supported in getting, right? Because you're right, maybe the business never happens, or it fails, or whatever. But the growth isn't just about, again, external measurements, it's about internal, right? So the approach there is like to rebuild her trust of men, to rebuild her understanding of like power in a relationship, to also rebuild her sense of worth and value. So what, like, I tried something and I failed. Are my failures, like, because it didn't work out, is that a representation of me as a person failing? Right? So that the conversations go a lot deeper, and it challenges you to have to confront yourself and overcome some of your insecurities. And with him as well, like, what kind of a partner do I want to be? Like, am I only with her because I expect certain things, right? And if she like doesn't deliver, as in like builds a business, makes money or whatever, then I'm like, I don't think her as an individual, her like pursuing her passions and me being able to support that, is that not life? Is that not enough? Or are we only measuring the outcome of our relationship by external success points?
No, absolutely. And I think, like, theoretically, I agree with you in the sense that, like, your failure does not define you. But I think it makes it a bit harder when someone's witnessing it. Like, if I'm alone in my flat and I'm not making something happen, only I know, you know, I don't have someone that I'm sleeping with knowing about it. It's like, that's the whole, but I want to move on to this. This is great, by the way, Kathrine. Thank you so much. I want to talk about when money takes a bad turn. So I want to talk about as the last part is about how when certain behavior in society for men and women turns this money thing into something quite, what I feel is unhealthy. So before we get into that, I want to ask you this question. If we're going to say like a man to a woman, okay, just keep it simple. Let's say if he lavishes you with gifts, when is it cute to accept gifts? And at what point is it buying your affection?
Well, that's what I was going to say is like, is the gift coming from a place of like, he wants to do something kind and thoughtful because the relationship is increasingly becoming meaningful, both of you, or is he doing it to buy your affection? right? So like we mentioned the example previously of like a guy who wants to take you on a really nice trip, but that's because you had mentioned that, you know, you wanted to visit that city and you wanted to see a certain landmark or, you know, do something there or visit a restaurant, and he remembered that and he like booked this lovely trip, versus like he wants to like whisk you away to somewhere, whatever, because he wants to show you, look, these are the things you can get if you're willing to be with me, when in reality you're not that into him, right? So you'd only be able to like discern that difference. Is this guy trying to like get me to want to be with him because his worth is the money he can provide and he's trying to buy my interest and affections, or is it coming from a place of like, we're doing this thing and it requires money to be spent, a gift to get, you know, that he's buying, but that is, it's coming because it's a thoughtful place of just of increasing the connection and the intimacy between us.
Yeah, and I think there are some telltale signs from the beginning, actually. You can see if someone's buying you affection or not, and there'll be things like you having issues, and instead of talking it out with the person, he goes off and buys you a car, or he goes off and buys you an expensive trip to Dubai, and you never wanted to go to Dubai. You wanted to go to like Florence to go and see something, the architecture.
Even right? As simple as flowers, right? Like you have an argument and he walks away, but then he turns up the next day with flowers. And it's like, basically he's trying to say, here's some flowers. Let's not discuss this anymore, right? Like I'm buying your silence, right?
But if you're discussing it and he's got flowers, then that's okay.
Hopefully, exactly. Like that's what you would, right? And maybe it would be like he bought the flowers because he wants to say, I'm not here to fight with you, right? Exactly. I want to show you I care. And so let's flag. Exactly. Right. So let's put the swords away, right? And let's take out our words. Yeah.
I wanted to give like an example when something is like an unhealthy show of wealth or money to buy your affection or your interest. So there was this person I knew that I know, and you know, I think he was trying to like date me, but I wasn't interested. I mean, it is something that transpired, you know, over time. And he was always dropping, you know, how much money he'd been trading. You know, it was always 5 figures. But, you know, obviously it turned out it was not his money. It's money that people gave him for him to invest, which is, you know, still cool. But like, there was no need for me to know the amount. We were talking about trading because I was like looking into it a while back. So we were talking about it, but there was no need. It was always an emphasis, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, he was always talking about 5 figures, this, 5 figures, that, right? Something that never like, you know, I'm happy when people do well, but it's not something that's going to endear me to you romantically.
Yeah.
So we went to this event, and then after the event, we went for a meal, which he, by the way, insisted on paying half, which I was happy to do. But it was just so funny how much he insisted when he was talking about all the 5 figures he was, you know, playing around with. Yeah. But I was happy to pay half because I didn't want to feel like I owed him anything. He was like, I had that vibe from him. Anyway, so we split. It was like a £40 bill, by the way. We split, and then we leave the restaurant, and I then, you know, say goodnight, thank you for tonight, and I'm about to go off to get the tube. And he says, it's the tube in London, and he says, oh no, I'll drive you. I'll you know, I've got my car just parked around the corner. And in my mind, I was like, I am not getting in a car with him. And I said, oh, no, that's sweet, thank you, but I'll just get the tube, it'll be faster. And then he said, but I've got a nice car. And I was like, I just went, no, I'll get the tube. And in my mind, I was like, this is crazy. Like, is he expecting me to like kick off my heels and be running towards the car because he's got a nice car and I'm just going to put myself in a vulnerable situation? And I was just like, I was dumbfounded. I was just like, you know, he knew not to insist because I was very clear. I'm very assertive, like for things like that. But I was dumbfounded, and I was wondering, like, we were talking about, you know, earlier about, you know, maybe like men, they see their worth tied up to their money, right?
Yeah.
And I was wondering, like, if maybe there is something that, obviously, it must work at times. There must be some women who are maybe saying, oh, brilliant, okay, I'll go into your Tesla, because he had like a Tesla or something like fancy like that, you know, and you know, they're just throwing themselves at him.
Yeah, it works. He's learned, society, you know, emphasizes that men, the more they earn, and it's not just society, that comes from evolution as well, men as providers and stuff, but we really like amplify it in the world that we live in, because everything is about the flashiness of it, right? The flashy, materialistic. Instagram is all about that. And so a man comes to like associate sometimes his worth as an individual through how much, he can be a provider. And it's because it's interesting you had that reaction, because I remember I had a friend who earned a fair amount of money, and he used to buy very expensive cars. And it was so interesting, like how much he talked about his cars, because it was very clear it was the primary way that like women were drawn to him. And I for me, a car is something that just gets you put from point A to B. Like I would have no idea what it is. I don't even have names to even like throw out to go, well, whatever. But I remember like we were going somewhere once, and he had tinted windows, and I was in the car, and he went to like grab something, and the windows were really dark, so like no one could see that someone was inside. And these like two girls got out from their car to go to the store, and then they started to circle around the car while I'm sitting in there. And like when he came out, they started a conversation with him. And I was like, oh my God, this is how it happens, right? This is how he's realized that his worth as a man is the car, right? And it's interesting because he's like, obviously to some degree, someone knows that it's an extrinsic value, right? So it's not me, it's the car you want. So there's an underlying unconscious, or even maybe a conscious thing of like, I'm kind of being used, right? So then he doesn't have a problem engaging with those girls, because it's like, okay, well, fair enough. You're using me for my money or my car. I'm going to use you for a good time.
Exactly. But I think also it reeks like with the guy who said, after the dinner said, well, I've got a nice car. To me, it also reeked of desperation and lack of self-respect. And that's where the issue for me comes from. I don't care if you've got a Tesla. Listen, I love money like most of the people. We all need money for the world to go around. I like nice holiday. I like a lot of nice things. I've got expensive taste. So I'm not shitting on money whatsoever. If you can provide, it's great, beautiful. But for me, if that's how you're going to try and reel me in, it is so off-putting to me. But maybe it's also because I come from such an female independent background, and definitely have never had to rely on a man. And it was definitely, I highly discouraged it myself. I was just like, no way.
Absolutely.
So it is so repelling to me, but I have seen it. I've seen it. I remember when I was in Canada in 2007, the other way, like with sex, basically, how I see these like producers, middle-aged, whatever. I was in my 20s back then, making advance and stuff like that. I mean, I've slapped a guy, like a really high-end, like very famous producer in his country, film producer, because he said something very inappropriate to me. And I slapped him in front of everyone. Like, I have no issue. Saying no and setting boundaries. And if you go too far. So in that way, but I saw then in the evening we'd go out and I'd see like younger girls than me, very beautiful girls, by the way, throw themselves at the same old guys that I thought were so fucking cringing. And I'd see them literally throw themselves at them, flirting endlessly, touching them, you name it. And so I think it's the same with money. It does work. And it's the same thing. Like if a man knows that he's powerful in his industry and see other women comes to him, it becomes this toxic, really unhealthy thing that's quite dangerous. And I think the same with money. If a guy thinks that, well, it does work with some women, look at them, look at her. She looks like a Barbie doll and she's coming up to me. She's a trophy wife, or whatever. Like she's like a trophy. And it becomes this thing that, like you said earlier, what if it gets stripped away? What's left of you then? What then? What if you can't provide for her? She's going to walk out and find a richer guy.
Right. Exactly.
And what are you going to do? What's going to happen to you? You're going to top yourself off, commit suicide?
But again, though, like at the same time, like maybe he's with her because she has the looks, right? And so what happens?
Oh, he's using her too.
What happens when she gains weight? Is he going to walk away, right? So it's like that's those setups work, and that like if that's your thing, that's fine. Like everybody has different, interests in a relationship. So some women are attracted to the power and the finances a guy can provide, and that's all they're attracted to. And he's attracted to her looks, and that's all he's attracted to. And that's the basis of that relationship. But that, to me, that feels really unstable because it's a variable that can be lost, right? I could lose my looks and he could lose his money. So now then what? And that's where, like, that's why I wouldn't want to be in that kind of a relationship, because like life happens and it just feels very destabilizing. If life happens, we go through challenges and then we're screwed. And yeah, in terms of like you feeling that it was sort of desperate and a needy move on his part. Well, yeah, because he wasn't measuring himself by his internal value that he gave to you. He was basically telling you to measure himself by his car, which is so insecure and so like desperate. It's a bad look. Like, and the guy who like maybe hasn't had a lot of stuff when he was young, maybe he wasn't, good looking or intelligent, or I don't know, for whatever reason, he didn't get, attract women. And now he's made money or he's in a high status job and women want him. It's unfortunate though, because he's now that insecure image of himself, like I have nothing to offer, but it's my money and my status what gets girls.
Yeah.
In him reinforces a negative self-image of himself. And it's also a put off to any real woman.
But I think it's also, Shanks, obviously, I'm not saying these people are bad people. And obviously I think like we all have our own insecurities, and obviously these are people who, they are good people. They're just obviously in a situation the way they are. Like I show insecurities in other ways too.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's such a shame because especially let's say if someone didn't have the looks when they were growing up, they would have developed a personality, right? That's how I developed my sense of humor. I was definitely not confident. I hated my looks. I had loads of issues with it in my head. So I think that's what developed my sense of humor, my personality, right? So you have all of that going for you. Like for me, my looks are important, but I know that my brain has actually a higher value to me. Like I can rely on that.
Yeah, I think like what you're saying there is like, like he might been, we might understand where he was coming from, but like he also has a part to play in reinforcing that, right? Because he's not trying to like gauge your interest through his character. He's playing into the fact that all he is his money by offering that. Yeah. And so like to someone that wants more, you see that and you go, come on, like you're selling yourself short and you're coming across as desperate, and that's what's a put off, right? Like I can understand if you've struggled in the past and like you've like gained your sense of worth now through your money and what you've achieved, but now you've really got to cultivate more than that, right? Your character, your integrity, but you almost don't want to, like you're kind of reinforcing the fragile image of yourself that is money.
Yeah, which is a shame. I think it's like anything. It's like if someone, like you see people who like work out a lot, they lost a lot of weight, they were very unhealthy or whatnot, and then they like look amazing, they look super healthy or whatnot. I understand that at the beginning they're always in like, bikini shot or like swimsuit, swim trunks. I get it. Like, put it all out in the world because you're so proud of yourself, and you should be. It's a lot of work to get to that level, right? You've basically earned that fucking body. And but at some point it needs to change because it gets boring. It's like, okay, well, what else have you got? Because now it's just you just peacocking the whole time, and it becomes really boring and off-putting, and it's like, what else do you have? Because you can go back, you could start putting on weight again, you could, everything could change. Okay, so I know, and that's my own fault, like I know you've got like a client coming soon, so you have your next appointment. So I want to ask you the finishing thoughts and then ask where people can find you. We may carry on this conversation on this time. Can I ask you, what would you wish your 18-year-old self knew about dating?
I think what I would tell my 18-year-old self is dating is that the next couple of years of dating is about having, fun experiences, meeting new people and stuff, but it's also about getting an understanding of who I am, what works for me in a relationship, and what what I'm looking for in a partner. So like not to date just to have a good time and just to have a fun time, but to date with an intention of growing and getting a better sense of myself and a better sense of what works for me in terms of a partner. Right. So dating with that intention. I think too many of us when we're younger, all we care about is how much fun we have with someone else, but we're wasting valuable opportunities for insight and lessons. So sure, you can date for fun, but also really think about, what is going wrong in these relationships? What is going right in the relationship? And what does that say about me and my potential future choice for a long-term partner? So learn from it as well as have fun.
Okay, that's good advice. That's sound advice. What stuff do you not put up with men anymore?
Well, just to stay on topic with today, because there's a lot of things, but like staying on topic with today is that a man that like hasn't cultivated a deeper sense of his own value and worth, other than his earning capacity, right? I want a man that sees himself and his character, his integrity, his resilience, what he has to offer in a relationship as more than the money and the bank account he brings to the table. That just feels too insecure, and not enough in terms of internal value.
Yes. No, I love this. Absolutely. And can you please tell us, where can people find you? How can they work with you? Give us all the goods.
Yeah. Okay. So, so as I said, I'm located in central London. So, that's that. My office is there, but I also work globally with people from everywhere, online. So if anybody is interested, just get in contact with me via my email, which is Kathrine without an E in the middle. So it's KATHRINE at KATHRINE, Kathrine Bejanyan, BEJANYAN.com.
And what's your website? Because that might be easier as a first language.
KathrineBejanyan.com.
And I'll put that in the show notes as well, so people can have a look at that. And no, that's been brilliant. And this has been such a great pleasure. Thank you so much, Kathrine.
Yeah, my pleasure as well.
Bye.
Bye.
And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, share it, subscribe it on iTunes, follow it on Spotify, or whichever platform you listen from. However you show love is how you can support this show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-s.com, or come and find me on Instagram. I have 2 accounts. One is at Tool for Dish It Podcast and at Health Expert Angie, link in the show notes. See you next week, and until then,
using health inappropriately.